ecosystem that there are other areas where a job that allowed me to stay in LA as opposed to what I wanted.
To a number of different departments. I started in media sales.
Well, I think that as we've seen many companies.
Welcome to this episode of our Class E podcast. I'm Mary Sturgill, the Innovation and Entrepreneur Faculty Fellow at Furman University and instructor in the Communication Studies Department. This podcast is brought to you through a partnership between Furman Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Communication Studies Department here at Furman. Thank you for joining us. And today we have the pleasure to chat with Johannes Mutske and Kenneth Fields, who are partners at Blue Ink Strategies. It's a company that specializes in discipline change and growth via business strategy, design thinking, organizational development, and unleashing people's potential. I love the way that sounds. Welcome, Kenneth and Johannes.
Thank you for having us.
And I also want to add that both of these gentlemen are senior fellows with the Furman Innovation and Entrepreneurship Office here at Furman University. We are so glad to have you with us today. We have a lot to talk about, but I think we should probably start with a little bit of background from both of you. So Kenneth, I'll start with you. Kenneth, tell us how you came to be where you are today, especially in this design thinking field. And I'm sure that could take a whole hour.
Yeah, I will definitely give you the abridged version. So I graduated from Furman in 1998 with degrees in chemistry and computer science, and went to work at Michelin in Greenville. And during that work, I also got an MBA at Clemson and started being more interested in the business side of things. And so that led me to about a 10-year career in information technology at Michelin, and then a 10-year career in what we called internal consulting at Michelin. And during that time, started working with a guy who sat right next door to me named Johannes, and we started kind of dreaming about the things that we were doing and how those might interact well with the world outside of Michelin. And we got the opportunity to do some work with innovation and the culture of innovation at Michelin, and that led us to a lot of interesting investigations around methodologies for innovation and ways of thinking, and ended up that design thinking was one that we received some training on and kind of stuck with us. And so we've been working in that area for a couple of years now and had a lot of success in both using it in our business world, but also in our personal lives, because we really believe that it's a great way to come up with new ideas and test them quickly so you can learn from them.
Right, right. So I do want to add here that Kenneth is in France right now, so he joins us via telephone. And Johannes is here in the studio at Furman University with us. Johannes, so you met Kenneth at Michelin. Give us kind of a history of yourself up to that point, since he kind of filled in some of that stuff. And we're going to delve into the partnership a little bit after this.
So it's a little ironic that Kenneth is phoning in from France. You can tell by my name, Johannes Mutske, that I'm not from Greenville, South Carolina.
Right.
They don't raise Johanneses around here very much. But I grew up in Germany, so my background is from Europe, and came to the U.S. to go to college. And then this was back in '96. I was looking around for a job, and at the time, BMW was starting its first factory very locally here. Mm-hmm. And so I jumped in really as a temp, and then was hired on, probably because of my German skills. I had a bachelor's in marketing, but I don't think it was necessarily because of that. And I remember thinking that I loved the experience, and I couldn't put my finger on why. Looking back, it was because I think it was so chaotic at the beginning. It was startup world, mm-hmm. and every day was better than the previous day because the previous day had been so challenging. So it was like we were just creating and innovating and creating more and more structure. And it was at that time that I think looking back, found that I was sort of an entrepreneur trapped in a corporate skin, mm-hmm. which became, I think, a little bit of Kenneth and my experience going through this. We were always looking for, where is there change? How do we stretch the elastic even further? And if I look back at my career at BMW, and then after that I went back to Europe and studied at the University of Economics in Austria, and then came back to Michelin, it was always at the forefront of change, whether that was in logistics or in customer service or transformation. We helped to start the Michelin's first startup incubator and then design thinking lab. So it was always around how do we help the company grow.
Right.
It's sort of a unique journey for somebody, I think for people like us who I think have that entrepreneurial fiber to be in a big organization.
Right. Right.
And so we can relate to a lot of people who are trying to change and grow, but often doing that in an environment that is not necessarily the normal place that you would do that.
Yeah, let's talk about that just a little bit. You say that phrase again, an entrepreneur in a corporate skin. So you kind of alluded to exactly what that is, but if you could give our listeners kind of a definition of that, and I think it fits many people and they don't even realize it.
Yeah, so I think when you use the word entrepreneur, you typically think of someone who's doing that, I would say in the wild, which means I have an idea and I'm starting something and I have no constraints, and I've been working at Starbucks, and if that doesn't work, I'll work back at Starbucks because I have an idea. There's nothing wrong with working at Starbucks, but I have no strings attached and I'm doing whatever I'm doing. Right. I think what you're finding in a lot of cases is there are many people and many companies who are in a system. So it could be in a university, it could be in a big company, and you're challenged with how do we grow again? Or I have an idea and I want that idea to come to life in an existing structure. How do I do that? And so it is challenging because you have a lot of those constraints which you wouldn't have if you were just on your own.
Right.
To try to make change happen within an existing organism. And so you have a lot of the legacy, you have history, you have processes that have been defined. You also have a lot of advantages that other people don't have. Sometimes you have a brand you can work with that gives you access. You don't have to create one. It opens a lot of doors for you. Sometimes you have a lot of funding. Yeah. You have access to capital or skills that an entrepreneur could only dream of. So it comes with its own set of limitations and advantages.
Yeah. And I would think that at Michelin, when you started the incubator, Kenneth, maybe you want to take this one, that you had the money probably because they started this program with you. And then where did you guys take that? Like, what was the idea behind that?
We kind of had a merge in our careers. Johannes worked on what we called the corporate incubator side, and I was working on kind of the moonshot innovation project for the company. We've got this crazy idea. Do you think we can do it in a third of the time with half the money than normal? So it was kind of interesting to see how the funding and the interest was there. I mean, people said, hey, innovation is something we want to do something with. We want to put some muscle behind it. And the thing that we saw in those experiences was that even though the company was maybe really excited about the idea and they were willing to support it publicly, inside the company, it was really kind of hard to find the support that you needed to get stuff done because there were all these other, I'll say, competing mindsets. Hey, wait a minute, I've got a project that I'm being incentivized for, and you want me to slow that down in order for you to do your great, innovative, creative thing, or you want me to spend less money on this project or these set of things over here so that you can spend more money on innovation and look at, creating new companies. And so what we saw is that there was actually a need for a culture of innovation. We had to kind of change our mindset as a company. And so that was, where we kind of got some, some not only funding, but desire to change mindset. And that's really when we saw things start to shift. We started doing surveys on innovation in specific departments and saying, hey, wait, what do you see that's a really big problem? And organizations would say, well, the thing that I have a problem with is I've got a lot of great ideas within my organization, but we don't know how to get them out. And so we could then help the organization develop kind of like a pitch contest like you guys have done recently at Furman and say, hey, what are those good ideas? Let's get them out on the table, and then let's start trying to fund those a little bit at a time. And at least in the areas that we worked in, we saw a huge shift in their mindset. And then when you came to them saying, hey, we need to invest some more money on innovation, or we need to do this unique and kind of off-the-wall project, they were much more engaged.
Right. Johannes, will you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's a paradigm, I think, that you have to, whenever you're doing entrepreneurship or innovation, that you have to adopt in your mind. Constraints are sort of the mother of creativity or innovation. If you're an entrepreneur out doing your own thing, you might have more freedom, but you equally have constraints. Right. And so in a big organization, I think that's the challenge that, Kenneth mentioned some of those. You have to think of, okay, I'm within those constraints. How do I adapt to those? And the challenge of a big organization and trying to do innovation inside of one, or entrepreneurship inside of a big organization, I always think about it as, I was thinking pictures. A big organization is like a big aircraft carrier. And then you want to do something innovative or entrepreneurial. It's like chaining a speedboat to the aircraft carrier. And you can go really fast until you get to the end of the chain, and then you're going about the same speed.
Then you're in trouble.
The decision making, the mindset, and all those things that Kenneth talked about, you have to start addressing those paradigms in order for the aircraft carrier to change too. And so many times you have the opportunity to have a positive effect on the mothership as well. I would say one of the key learnings we had during that incubator startup phase is you're always balancing autonomy and relevance. Those would be the two factors. Autonomy is you can work on all kinds of things that have nothing really to do with day-to-day activity and have all the freedom in the world. And you need freedom to act and work differently.
Right.
But at some point that catches up with you when people ask you, so Kenneth and Johannes, what have you guys been working on again? Oh, and how much money have you been spending? Okay, and what have you been producing? Oh, nothing that means anything to me today. So why do I need you around? Relevance is, are we solving day-to-day problems for the company? Are those things really happening? I might sacrifice my autonomy a little bit because I have to get involved in the day-to-day, but I'm producing things that are useful and that people say, wow, you've really helped me with my product problem, with the way I'm going to market or whatever. And what we've really found for startups, innovation, even in corporate settings is when you're starting, always err on the side of relevance. What are you doing that's producing results? Because that creates momentum. Small wins, small prototypes, small results create hope in people's minds that things can actually change. And that buys you, back to the aircraft carrier and speedboat, extra chain to go for the bigger stuff. And so, like when Kenneth was saying, working at the employee level to help them think differently or have breakthroughs around product challenges that they've had or internal ways of working, those actually, you could look at those and say, well, those are really incremental, that's not really innovative, but it actually is the spark that helps people think differently and gives them hope that actually their ideas will be taken seriously.
And I think a lot of employees, and especially in a large corporation, any corporation, want to feel like their ideas matter. And so let's talk a little bit about that. You talk about baby steps and change. You both have mentioned how important change is and changing that culture to an innovative thinking culture. A lot of the projects that you did at Michelin came about through all the different departments. Can you talk to a few of those?
Certainly there was I'll let Kenneth talk about the one that he was working on. There were a couple, you learn as much from your failures as you do from successes. And so we had a couple that didn't work or that didn't go further. Some of them were, how do you make a brand, such as Michelin, that's well known, relevant to a younger audience? The average age of a Michelin consumer is about 55 years old, and so the thought is, how do you bring that down to something that you could talk to 20-something-year-olds? You don't wait till they're 50 to talk to them. And so how do you, with all of the attributes of safety and all of that, how do you make that palatable to them? And so one of the ideas we had was, could you do something with skateboard wheels? Grip and safety and all the stuff that you would typically put into a tire that would be on a high-end car, could we make those characteristics come alive for skateboarders? And we had huge success with that. I mean, very relevant influencers and a lot of demographics that were about that age. It was very relevant. We decided not to go forward with that because the market wasn't big enough and other reasons. But again, one of those trials that showed us, hey, there's something here if we want to move forward with a brand that's made applicable to that age group. Another one that actually is successful and is a success in the market now and has won several awards. We had done some work on rolling resistance for trucks. A lot of people know that a truck's main cost driver is fuel, so anything you can save in fuel is a big deal. And so we said, well, why should we limit ourselves just with tires? Why don't we look at aerodynamics? And so today, if you are on American highways at least, you see a lot of these spoilers that are on top of trucks, a lot of the trailer skirts that are on the bottom. A lot of those are one-off products that really are not harmonized, so it's not a system. You buy one from one supplier, another from another supplier. Michelin really invested a lot of time and energy in proving out fuel savings through an entire system, and then tuning that to the kind of truck you have, whether that's long haul, short haul. And so enabling them to save, I think it's between 5 and 7% more or less in fuel consumption, which is huge,
That's huge.
for a
Yeah.
truck.
Yeah.
And so here you have a tire manufacturer who's branching out into thinking on behalf of their customers and saying, how do you do that, across the board, and add more levers to that bring the brand promise alive, but do that through other means as well.
Right. Kenneth, talk about the project, one of the projects that you worked on.
So it was very similar, in fact, in terms of trying to make the brand relevant to a new market. But in this case, the new market wasn't necessarily based on age, but based on location. We saw that the Michelin brand had huge recognition in places like the U.S. and Europe. But when you get overseas, specifically in India, the brand really did not have a whole lot of relevance. And the company had a strong desire to increase its presence in India. They had chosen to build a plant there that had over €1 billion spent on it. And so there was a really strong desire to figure out things that would be made in this plant for the Indian market. And the challenge was that Michelin had always been seen as a prime brand, and therefore it was able to charge a little bit extra for that. Except in India, nobody knew the brand.
Right.
And in fact, the brand stood for long-lasting performance is one of the things that Michelin would say. And so in India, the roads are really not at the same quality level you'd see in Europe or North America. So the tires don't necessarily last as long. And so the challenge of this project was, how do we come up with a tire that we're willing to put the Michelin brand name on, but they can withstand the rigors of the roads in India and be made in India. And so that's a project that was a strong desire of the CEO of the company. And he said, you've got half the time that a normal project would take. Go see what you can do, which resulted in first putting your feet on the ground. I mean, if you're trying to design anything innovative for another group, company, organization, whatever, the first thing to do is go out and develop a little bit of empathy for the problems they're having. So
Right.
That meant that, it was 120 degrees in Delhi, and we're out in the transport Nagar looking under trucks, trying to understand how they're using their tires, try to get a feel for it. And then over a few year period, we were able to develop that tire, which is in the market now in India, called the X Guard. And it's a product that's on original equipment trucks in India. You can buy it at your local truck dealer, but it's a product that appeals to the local market. It's not a product that we've launched all over the world. It's a product that is made for India and has seen pretty good success there.
So you've taken the kind of the incubator idea and you've spread that, and you've taken to this design thinking model. Can you talk about what that is exactly? I mean, it's pretty popular right now, terminology that I think a lot of people know, but do they really know?
Yeah, so I would say design thinking is a term that I think is its own worst enemy.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are not familiar with it, you think design, so you're thinking, somebody is either drawing pictures or sketches or something, and then you think thinking, so I'm thinking really hard or doing yoga or something, and then I try to put it doesn't help, right?
Right.
And so I think for people who are coming in, what is design thinking? We like to use the word customer-focused innovation. In some other circles, it's called human-centered design, which is a little bit better.
Right.
But it really starts with the needs of the customer or the needs of a person.
Right.
And trying to, before you go any further with technology or does it make money or whatever, what are the needs that the customer has? And do I really understand that at a personal level? So not market research, white papers, whatever, but have I walked a mile in their shoes? Mm-hmm. There's a story of others who have done work with truck drivers in the past, which I really love. And instead of going and studying demographics and how many truck drivers there are, they said, let's drive around for 1 or 2 weeks with truck drivers and just see what they experience.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the insights they had. Another real cool story, I think this one came from Procter & Gamble, just to illustrate the point. They were doing a project on cosmetics for men, mm-hmm. So challenging topic. And so there's this video of this researcher sitting across from this man, and the interview is clearly going nowhere. Asking, do you use lotions? Do you use all this stuff? No, I don't use any of that stuff. But he's sitting across from him in his living room, and he's observant, and he's looking over at the side of the couch, and there's a box. And he says, "What's in the box?" "Oh, that's my foot bath. And I stand all the time at work, and I absolutely need my foot bath, and it really helps me," and all of that kind of thing. And they get into this long conversation about feet and, hardworking people and all of that. Had this person not been in this guy's living room, with a cat on his lap, across from him, whatever, in his own environment, you would have completely missed it.
Absolutely.
We've done work before in projects where, for managers that are on a shop floor, going to their office and sitting in their office and asking them how they manage. And you look over at, "What is that big stack of paper over there?" "Oh, well, I have to print all that off because I have to work on 30 reports, and this is the only way I can remember my employee's birthday." Think of the normal way that most big companies would do it. If you bring them into your sterilized environment and focus group setting, where you've stripped away their entire environment, you're not feeling what they feel, you're not seeing you miss so much.
Right.
And so I think the power of design thinking is getting in the customer's shoes and feeling what they feel. It's a very old methodology, it's a very old approach. There's a lot of questions as like, why now? Why is it coming back? I think my answer to that is, we're in a very, very dynamic market where things are changing rapidly all the time. And so you're in a perfect market where you can either grab opportunities and be a disruptor or be disrupted. And I think we've been in a lot of companies lately, almost all of them have some kind of a slogan about customer first, or we all need to have a united front in front of the customer, and something customer centricity is the focus. I can almost not think of a company who's not talking about that.
Right.
But then you have to ask the question, so what are you doing about that? And often that's sort of silence.
Right.
Oh, well, we're sending our people to go visit customers more, or we're all watching videos or something. And I think design thinking is a nice answer to that, because it gives you the how. How am I supposed to get to know my customer better? The first step of the whole approach is empathy. And that in itself is sort of a scary word for big organizations.
Oh, for sure.
It doesn't, it sounds too personal.
Yeah. You don't think, when you think of big organizations, you don't think of empathy.
Right, yeah. Empathetic sounds sort of soft and fluffy and weak, but it starts with empathy, getting into understanding human beings, and really immersing myself into their lives before I even start thinking about what I could do for them. Yeah. So I think that's why it's seeing a resurgence.
Yeah. Kenneth, do you want to add anything to that?
The thing that I've seen in my roles has been much more having empathy for both the customer and the employee. Because a lot of times the companies will say, "Wow, we need to really, we've got to understand our customers better," which is absolutely true.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're not doing something in parallel that's bringing your employees up to speed and on board to say, "Hey, we're concerned about you too, and we don't want to create something for our customer that actually creates more hassle and headaches and pain and suffering inside of our organization," then the employees aren't going to jump on board. So I think one of the big challenges I've seen is when a company says, "Yes, I'm interested in this, and yes, I want to develop empathy for my customer," not to forget that there's also some employees there that need to be empathized with as well. Because if you're not trying to move both of those simultaneously, you'll find out your customer understanding and desire to help is so far out in front of your employee desire to help that you can't very easily make all that work well together.
Right.
I would second that, in that I think that's often a missing piece when we're designing offers for customers, is that a part of that design doesn't include the employee who's doing it. And so, we've sort of had the approach that you can't have an amazing customer experience if you don't have an amazing employee experience. And so those two have to be designed together and deliberately. And often that's where it falls apart. We have all of these great intentions for how the customer is supposed to feel or think or be impressed, and our employees don't feel or are impressed by that. We were working with one company not long ago who said they were talking specifically about technology, and they wanted to do a big technology push to the customers. And they said, we can't do a big technology push to our customers and be considered the most innovative when our employees are working with laptops that are 20 years old.
I would agree with that.
It's not going to work. It has to go hand in hand.
Right.
The technology experience inside has to be equivalent to the one outside. So it's just we're not talking about technology here only, but just using it as an example of how that has to fit together.
Right. Completely agree. When did you start your company?
in late 2014, we really got serious about it. I had some brainstorming sessions, specifically one that I remember at Greenfield's Bagels on Pelham Road, and then our first customers. We started working with them in January of 2015. So we just celebrated our 5th birthday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So both of you talk about change. How do you kind of maneuver that change? You're still working for your respective companies, I believe, and your own company. How do you handle all that? That's a lot.
I'll take the first swing at that.
Okay.
So it's definitely a patient wife and
Yes.
some nights and weekend work. There's plenty, obviously, still going on in my corporate job at Michelin, and keeping up with all that is critical. But for me, at least, it's been really important to spend some early morning time on it, and then when I come home, usually focused on my wife and kids until at least the kids go to bed, and then I might try to get a few more things done. And then having relocated to France recently, that's also increased my walking time. So I spend about 30 minutes each way walking to work, which is an excellent opportunity to use a tool called Voxer. We're not getting paid for that endorsement, to exchange basically voicemails with Johannes. So the way we're keeping up with each other is to use that, and we can kind of leave messages for each other during the day or as we have the time. So it's been a challenge to kind of juggle all that and a lot of early mornings and late nights, but it's been really fun to watch it grow as well.
Yeah, and I don't think you guys are alone in that most entrepreneurs probably do start out working for a corporation before they do go out on our own. Johannes, do you want to address that a little bit too?
Yeah, so I think that is a good point. Most entrepreneurs start off with something like a side hustle at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually thought about branding that, sort of the side hustle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just doing something in addition to what you're already doing. And I think one is not although it can feel that way, one is not the enemy of the other.
Right.
Sometimes the one foot that you do have maybe in your day job is actually informing or helping to think through the other part. Mm-hmm. And also creates, like we said earlier, those constraints that force you to be a little bit scrappy, because you don't have unlimited resources. You have your 45 minutes in the morning and your hour and a half in the evening, and you have to fit it into that box.
Right.
I would say the other thing, and this goes back to design thinking a little bit, that you live out is the whole, I would say, the key to change is sort of to have a prototyping mindset. Somebody told me one time, you do small things and tell big stories. And so just continuing to try stuff. Tried this and maybe didn't work really well, or we put together some kind of a proposal for a client and they rejected it, but we learned how we would do it next time, or they accepted it, and now we can all go home and panic and figure out how we're going to actually do it. So it's just that learning cycle of taking small steps, focusing on where you're getting traction, so whether that's customer feedback or other folks that are giving you feedback, and then just capitalizing on that. And if I look back at this journey, Kenneth and I are always talking about, we would have never predicted the way it would have turned out. The fact that we now have a team of people, the fact that we have the clients that we have, mm-hmm. the kind of work that we're doing. But it all, it didn't all come to us at one time. It was small steps done deliberately, and sometimes maybe we made a lot of mistakes along the way, but keep continuing to push forward and learn.
Yeah. I think that's a great advice for our listeners, small steps that continue to push you forward. And I kind of live like that, or by that myself. I have a couple side hustles. And so I try to do something that leads me toward some progress of some sort in one of those every single day.
For people that, especially people like me who, I'm somewhat of a visionary, so it's a blessing, but it can also be somewhat of a curse.
Yeah.
Because you're always dissatisfied. You're always looking at what it could be and what it should be, and it never is that way.
Right.
And re-gearing your mind to say, I'm going to take one small step. I'm going to do something to continue pushing a direction. It's amazing with small companies and big companies alike is that freedom of when you're moving, you will learn more than if you're stopped.
Right.
My favorite analogy is, you're a car in the parking lot at night and you turn on your lights and of course you can't see to your destination.
Right.
But the only way to see more is to move. And so the future sort of unfolds for you 90 or 100 feet at a time as you keep moving. And sometimes you have to do a U-turn and go the other way.
Right.
But you get clarity as you move.
Yeah.
And so considering holding that lightly and considering everything a work in progress actually helps you to move faster than if you take it so seriously and it has to be right and there's a big vision and we have to be here by this point. Just keep moving. That's the main thing.
I know a lot of people start their businesses as partners, as you guys have done. How has your partner enhanced, or your partnership and your own special skills enhanced your partnership? Kenneth, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I would love to. So we've laughed about this a lot, even today. So Johannes is a vision guy. He's a big picture, sees all the pieces coming together, and I am much more, action focused. Give me the thing to do, and it will be done rapidly and well. And so in the early days of our partnership, I would say Johannes was kind of thinking, hey, what if we did it this way? What if we did it that way? What if we looked at these kind of clients? And I was much more, hey, dude, give me the website. Let me get that up to date. We're going to go see this client. Let me make sure that we've got an agenda and that we've got clear action items after the meeting. We've looked into the past, say 4 or 5 months as we've had a little bit of a transition in our company. As I've moved, I have done a lot more of the thinking piece of trying to understand where we're positioning and what our real value add is. And Johannes has been thrown into the action piece. And so I guess from my perspective, it's been great to kind of be able to play both sides of the ball there, the vision and the action. And then the second is it's just like in a relationship, one person's up. If the other person's down, at least you're not both down at the same time. And we have we've definitely lived off of that. There's been challenges in our work and personal lives, and having the other person there to say, hey, I understand what's going on. And not only are you going to get through whatever it is you're going to get through, but our business is going to get through that as well has been a huge blessing.
Yeah. Johannes?
It's hard to say that better than Kenneth did, I think. I'm much more verbose. He's much more succinct.
Which is a good mixture, because sometimes you need to know when to be which one.
Right, yeah, but he is so good at just getting it out and to the point.
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot about him. So I would just back up and say, I think our partnership sort of reflects the value that we bring to our customers. I always think of, there's a lot of people who want to talk to you about strategy and thinking, which is probably the end that I would mostly or be on more. Right. And Kenneth, or the other set of competitors or other folks would be focused on doing and getting stuff done. I think our sweet spot is sort of that entrepreneurial skill, which both Kenneth and I have lived, thinking and doing rapidly, having big ideas and doing them. And we've done that in startup garages, literally sitting around the table with a Post-it note saying, okay, what are we going to do next? And we've done that in corporate boardrooms where the CEO looks at us and says, okay, we've got this big strategy. What are we going to do next? So it's that agility of big picture and then declining that into what are we doing. And so even our personalities reflect that. As Kenneth said, much more of a doer and getting stuff done. I'm more on the thinking side. And, Kenneth does an amazing job at actually putting some action behind, what we want to get done. It makes us move faster than I would ever dream we could probably move. I like to think about where we're going. I like to present that to clients and probably sometimes overcommit us to things that we are not ready for yet, but we do it anyway. And
you jump in there and do it.
Yeah. And at least for me as well, and I think I don't want to speak for Kenneth, but I think we both share in this. When you are alone as an entrepreneur in innovation, it's easy to talk to yourself.
Yes.
And to talk to yourself into despair or into, unbelievable hope.
Absolutely.
You can sell yourself the Kool-Aid and say, this is amazing, or you can just talk yourself in circles and just get frozen about knowing what next to do.
And I think that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, the latter.
Yeah, and that's where having a partner, I would never want to do this without a partner. Right. Having a partner, or I would say for any entrepreneur, at minimum a coach, somebody that can be looking in and sort of giving you the view from the outside is invaluable, because it really unlocks you from your own thinking and helps you to move forward. And like we said earlier, it's about momentum.
Right.
And so when you're stuck mentally, is where you need other people to be around you.
Right. So Blue Ink Strategies does that for companies. You work with people from startups to big corporations to academics. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say that's sort of been are those three things that you mentioned are a little bit of an interesting combination.
They are.
But there's a rhyme to that reason, I think. One is, when a startup gets to a certain phase of growth, and we would typically say when you transition from starting to scaling, so when you have traction and you have a product and this thing is starting to take off, the real interesting thing is that what has gotten you to that point is not going to get you beyond that. Starting, it's all about passion for the product,
right.
passion for your customers, working hard, doing it all yourself, being a multitasker. If you want to scale, it's all about building that into a process that can be duplicated. So that's people, it's teams, it's your culture. And so that's a tipping point for a lot of companies. And we find that that's really a niche where we can help customers who have grown to accelerate that growth by helping them create structure. A lot of them have no experience in doing that. If it's you, me, and the dog that started the company,
right.
We didn't really need a dashboard, strategy, all the stuff that maybe big company people would say that's table stakes. Didn't need it. Life was so simple. And so that's where we've really found where we can help entrepreneurs to get to that next level of growth. Big companies, if you think about it, a lot of them are really stuck with the same problem,
yes.
right? They're growing at 1 or 2%. And they're like, where's the next idea that's going to help us grow by 10%? So what do they want? They want that scaling phenomenon that I just described for the
right.
startup. So they're really after the same thing. But the trick is you have to do that in a big organization. It goes
right.
back to the speedboat aircraft carrier thing. And so again, we find that when we're looking at big companies, a lot of times it's that return back to the customer. Startups are much more in tune with their customers typically because they just came out of that.
Right.
And they're looking for a structure. Yeah. So a lot of times we say the gazelles, the startups want to become more like the elephants. And the elephants want to become more like the gazelles again. So they want to rediscover their customer. And those that have discovered the customer and who are growing actually need to discover structure. So depending on where you are in that life cycle, it's about growth,
right.
which is why that's what we've founded our company around, is helping
Always,
companies grow. It just comes through a different lens depending where you are in the company life cycle.
Right. Kenneth, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it is definitely it was a surprise to us, frankly. We didn't start out trying to work on these two different areas. We saw what the big companies were doing, and we said, hey, we're sure the small companies can use that, but kind of along the way, using this prototyping and design thinking mindset, we said, hey, there's also this big section of the corporate world that needs what these small companies have, and so being able to talk to both sides has really helped us add value to both. That sounds it sounds really, really good when Johannes explains it that way, but I could promise you that 3 years ago we could not have, or even 2, I don't know, that we would have articulated it that way. We thought that we were going to work with gazelles, and all of a sudden the elephants showed up needing help. The takeaway for me there is not necessarily to add to what Johannes just said, but to say that, wow, don't close your eyes to opportunities that might surprise you, because the fact that we can have this discussion about elephants and gazelles was definitely not on our radar just a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, to always have that prototyping mindset and the design thinking mindset, no matter where you are in your company.
Maybe one example we could add just to make it come alive.
Yeah, do that.
Because it may sound a little bit like prototyping, design thinking,
Philosophy.
Gazelles and elephants.
Yeah.
I'm a little lost. Speedboats and aircraft carriers. We're just producing more and more mental images. But not a while ago, actually, Kenneth and I were working with a plastics company, for a middle-sized company, well-established. They've been around for probably 40 years or so, doing very well. I would call them a market leader in almost every way, well-established. And so their management team came to us and said, help us think about how we can grow again. We've had a great run, the company's doing well, but if we wanted to have some kind of a breakthrough in our growth in a pretty commoditized industry, very mature plastics industry, how would we even, and we're not up for an acquisition.
Right.
So, if I was in my corporate strategy world again, I would have said, well, you probably need to buy somebody, but that was off the table for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And so we spent a bit of time with them, and we said, okay, what are some ideas? We understood their business model and what makes them tick and where their competitive advantages and all of that. And then we said, what are some ideas, some sort of niches of value that we think are sort of laying around on the table that we're not doing anything with? There was a bunch of ideas. I can't remember them all. One that sticks out in my mind was they had this certain category of packaging material that they never really advertised. They used it to package up their own stuff, but they never really advertised it as a product category. And so we said, okay, one way to do this would be we could go study that market. We could do market, spend another 3 to 6 months doing whatever, and then coming back and presenting that back to management team, and then deciding what we were going to do. The other way to do it was, what is the smallest possible version of this that we could just do tomorrow or in the next 30 days and start learning? And so, Kenneth, maybe you can describe what happened next after that with the newsletter and all of that.
What the company did is they said, fine, we're going to advertise in our next, email newsletter. We've got these additional products out there. Just see what happens. And it ended up that, I think the previous month they had sold maybe, I'm going to throw out a number, say $3,000 worth of these products in the previous month. And, the first week after that, they sold $5,000 worth. They were shocked at how well this product, which really didn't cost them anything additional to advertise, they already had suppliers for it. They were already able to personalize it. But just, putting it out there in front of people made a huge difference. Same folks did a similar test with Amazon. They said, hey, we've got this specialized packaging that we don't really sell a whole lot of, but it's really important for the small segment of users, and we don't know how to get to them directly. But I wonder what would happen if we put it on Amazon, and they had strikingly similar results. So being willing to say, yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but hey, if I test this out for a month, what's the worst that could happen? It's the same on the, if I send out my marketing email and nobody wants to buy my specialized packaging materials, well, I wasted one email, but that's not a huge cost. And in fact, that's not what happened to them. So being willing to take that chance and say, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but, worst case, I haven't sunk the company. In best case, I found a new channel or a new opportunity for us to exploit.
That's really, if you peel the onion back on the lesson learned there, typical strategy management team would have sat around, board meeting, here are the minutes, let's have a subcommittee, study this, whatever.
Right,
Here,
and study it again.
Yeah, so here we brought this prototyping mindset to strategy and said, in 30 days, we're not launching a new product line. We're just going to put an Amazon link up and try something and see what happens. We'll learn more by trying stuff than we will by sitting around drawing more arrows on the whiteboard and putting more teams together. And I think it also frees up people, big and small companies, to act because it's just a prototype. And we've often said, consider everything a prototype. Consider your strategy a prototype, consider your organization a prototype. This room setup can be a prototype. We'll do it for 10 days, and if we don't like it, we'll move it around again and put the furniture where it actually needs to go.
And that's exactly what we've done.
Right. And all of a sudden it unlocks the energy of people to try stuff versus being paralyzed by almost like, I have to throw a basket from the other end of the court and I can't do it. Well, let's just throw it towards the basket and then we'll get a little closer and throw it again. And just giving people, and it's back to the people part, because entrepreneurship, innovation is really about people.
Right.
Giving them the energy and the courage to try something and to move.
Yeah, I started to say, I think that's the biggest problem, see if you agree with this, with people not going after their ideas, is that sense of paralyzation.
Yeah, and it's the fear of failure as
right.
well, and not really understanding that there is no failure other than the failure to learn.
Yeah, I love that. Say that again.
There's no failure other than the failure to learn. I had one prototype that I was working with a startup not long ago, actually, and we presented this to a customer. We thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, and the customer was livid, was insulted that we had even shown them this prototype. And how could we possibly? And it's absolutely not what I need. But what I do need is, and then he starts listing everything else and the price point at which he would buy it and all of this. It was one of the best interviews I've ever had. And guess what our next prototype was? Exactly that.
Right, right.
So we elicited such a strong reaction that we actually got the truth about what they wanted.
Right.
And so everything you try, when you think of it as a prototype, is a way to learn.
Right. But your initial response probably, or your client's initial response was, oh no, we failed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy sitting beside me said he thought his career was ending. But afterwards, he would point back to that moment and say, that's probably really where the company was born, is when we got that straight kind of a feedback. But it only happened because we put something in front of someone for them to react to.
Right.
And I think that liberates you to say, I'm learning, and so I'm putting something in front of someone, And the whole point about prototyping is you haven't spent a lot of time with it anyway, so there's not much to lose.
Right.
And that's one of the keys, is often people spend way too much time building things before they expose it. And so then it's hard to let go. I call it the kitten principle. I have 3 girls at home. If we go to the pet store, the longer we pet the kitten, the more likely it is we're going to take it home.
Right.
So put it down. So
Put the kitten down.
show the prototype. Get it in front of
Right.
someone sooner than later. Otherwise, you'll fall in love with it.
Yeah. So speaking of learning, we have this great opportunity coming up toward the end of April. You guys are facilitating a design thinking certification right here at Furman. And I want you to talk about that. It's called the customer-centric innovation. What exactly? I think we alluded to it a little earlier, but can you talk specifically to what customer-centric innovation is?
Sure. Again, it's starting with the customer need specifically. It's the whole idea of empathy and immersing yourself in the customer's pain point, really understanding their journey, what they're living, what their core desires are. And then the innovation part, when you say customer-centric and then innovation, then comes into, so how do we meet that need in a creative way? How do we do that in a way that those needs are not met today? How do we meet them in a different way that would delight the customer? Again, to bring an example to that, one of my favorite examples currently, if you think about it, is Peloton.
Oh, yes.
You think of the classic problem that most people have is, I want to do sports, but I'd have to go somewhere,
right.
To do sports. So I can't be in a community of people doing that. I can't have access to trainers. If you would have asked me, what is the most flashy exercise equipment that you could innovate on, the last thing I would have told you would have been an exercise bike.
Right.
It's probably the favorite laundry hanger of most people.
Right.
But here, this company has said, wait a minute, we're going to break that paradigm of you can't exercise at home and be with other people, because you absolutely can. Now you're in a community. You can't exercise at home and have access to world-class trainers. Now you can. So here they took a fresh look at what does the customer need. I want the convenience of being at home.
Right.
I also want to be with other people or feel like I'm being with other people and the community, and I want to have access to training. And they sort of took the paradigm off and they said, how do we innovate around that?
Right.
Perfect example of customer-centric innovation.
Yeah, love that. That's a great example too. So Kenneth, I want to ask you this question. Why is Furman University positioned to best offer the certification program that you guys are going to run at the end of April? You have a long history since you were a graduate.
In fact, Furman was recently named, I think it was the number 5 most innovative school by U.S. News and World Report.
That is correct.
So clearly, there's a great trend on campus of people seeing Furman as innovative. There's recently been the creation of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Office, which you mentioned in the lead-in. And so there's just been a lot of, I'll say, effort and focus put on innovation by Furman in the past few years. And it's really been, I'll say, in sync with what we've seen in the Greenville and the upstate area, where really there's just a lot of activity going on in startups, in large companies like Michelin and BMW wanting to be innovative. And so Johannes and I have kind of been talking about this for a couple of years, and every time we've talked about it, Furman is the place. It's a beautiful campus. There's great work on innovation going on. And in fact, I've had this conversation with a few folks. Furman is officially known as what they call a liberal arts university, which is one of those names like design thinking. I wish there was a better name for it, but all the liberal arts is helping you think broadly about a topic and understand it well enough to take action. And that's really what design thinking is.
Yeah.
So the background that Furman's got in the liberal arts area, the work that they're currently doing on innovation made it really a no-brainer for us to work together to develop this course.
Yeah. Who should attend the certification?
I think there's definitely several levels. If you're responsible for innovation in an organization and you don't know what to do next, this is a great place to start. It's not a long commitment, but it gives you just in a few days a really good summary of one of the leading methodologies out there, the leading ways of thinking about innovation. There's also, as you mentioned several times, Mary, there are folks in organizations who are really chomping at the bit to do something within that company, and they want to kind of learn new ways of thinking and be exposed to that. So this is another way to do it. If you've got a desire to learn about innovation or be innovative in your current role, again, it's just for a few days out of the office, the payback's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think so.
Finally, I think there's a third group of people, maybe there are some folks out there who say, wow, I'd like to do my own thing, and I just don't even know where to start. This is a way to figure out something that, you can put your hands around and test really quick. And, we're going to talk about prototypes being low fidelity, and all that means is, they're made out of cardboard and pipe cleaners, and that's stuff that any of us can do anywhere we are. So the things that you're going to learn in this class are stuff that you can take back and immediately apply when you get back either to your office or to your garage where you're going to do your new startup.
Yeah. Johannes, talk about some of the things you said, I think pre-show when we were talking about this is just going to be something that people will not want to miss. Why is that?
Yeah, so this will be anything but a class, I think. And so that's why I love the whole idea of doing it at Furman, and why I think, I did not graduate from Furman, but just I love what Furman is doing in terms of reinventing itself and sort of bringing this idea of learning in this different way to people who maybe are in a corporate environment and doing that in academia. I mean, it's just that combination is so cool to me and shows me that the leadership here is so forward thinking. So the class will be very hands-on. It'll be a little bit of obviously instruction. We shouldn't even call it a class. The whatever we're going to call it, boot camp, certification program. Yeah, the experience. Let's say the experience will hopefully be an amazing one, but very very hands-on. So you will have an opportunity to practice in a live setting. So sitting across or standing across from real consumers, testing your prototype live. In a very short period of time, you'll be surprised. In a few hours, if not minutes, you will have something that you will barely believe is possible to be shown to any human being, and you will show it to a human being, and you will get their feedback, and you'll learn a lot from that. Also, you'll be in a small group setting where there will be coaches who are highly trained, certified, who will be working with you specifically. There's a skill component, but there's also, I would say, a personal development component, and I would say if you come, which I would encourage you to, think of it as almost like trying on new clothes, but trying on different behaviors. You'll be uncomfortable sometimes, you'll be stretched sometimes, but try them on. Have the courage to try them on. It's a safe setting. There will be people there to help you through it. You'll discover parts about you that are amazing, you didn't believe you could actually do, but you can. You'll learn a lot. It'll be inspiring. You'll be on your feet most of the time. You're in an amazing environment here at Furman where everything around you is taken care of, great facilitation, lots of fun, beautiful campus, plenty of food, all of that. So I think you can really engage your mind and be fully present.
Yes.
And hopefully have an immersive experience that not only is teaching you a skill, but I hope is transformative for you as a person. And I really believe that.
Yeah. We will have some information on this workshop or certification, this experience, as we just decided to call it, in our show notes that will have exactly a link that you can go to and register and become a part of this this great opportunity for yourself or your company, either one or both. So we like to leave our entrepreneurs, guys, with a piece of advice. And this whole show, if you've been listening, has been chock full of just great advice. But Kenneth, if you could pick one thing that you think entrepreneurs or innovative thinkers need to make sure that they are doing in order to move forward, what would that be?
I would say probably focusing on action instead of perfection. I think Johannes said, polishing, trying to make it better and better and better and better. You will learn so much more by getting out in the real world and trying something than you will creating a PowerPoint slide that describes your idea. In fact, we've got one of our mentors said PowerPoint makes your ideas look better than they actually are. So don't spend your time trying to come up with the perfect whatever it is. Take whatever your idea is out there and test it with somebody and see what they think, and then build a little something and try that again. That test and learn and test again cycle is really critical.
The founder of Eventbrite said, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you waited too long. So I think what Kenneth is saying is get embarrassed and put something out there in front of people.
Yeah. Good advice. All right, Johannes, what would be your nugget?
Yeah, so I think my nugget would be spend time living the life of your customers or of your target users, depending on what you're doing. So don't just observe them from the outside. I think sometimes we think of our customers like we're going to the zoo a little bit. We're sort of looking in on them. Go where they are. Feel what they feel. It's amazing how many assumptions we make about other people. So dare to be vulnerable and sort of penetrate the life of the people that you're trying to work with or innovate for. Especially for people in big organizations, it's often challenging because there's so much distance between you and the actual customer.
Right.
Really go live their life. You will be astounded if you go through life and with other people with open eyes how much you will learn. Yeah. So I would encourage you to do that. Live the life of an explorer with your customer.
Oh, I like that. So if someone would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, so the easiest way to see what we've been up to is to check out our website at blueinkstrategies.com. That's Inc, I-N-C, like incorporated. You can also check us out on LinkedIn. We try to publish there every couple of weeks just to keep folks in the know on kind of what we're doing and what we're thinking about.
Very cool. Johannes, anything to add to that?
We love to interact with people that are like-minded. So, if you have something to contribute or you have some thought leadership you'd like to share with us, we are always open for that, and we love to spread good ideas, and they certainly don't all come from us.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being on the Class E podcast with us today. I, for one, have totally enjoyed this and probably could talk for hours on end about this stuff, so we will definitely have you back to talk some more about design thinking and what you do with your customers. But until next time, again, you folks might want to attend the workshop in April put on by the Furman Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. We will have show notes for that, but you can also go to Furman Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the Furman website, and find out information on that. And some great pieces of advice that we will also have in the show notes for you as well. Gentlemen, thank you for your time and your experiences and being willing to share that with us on our Class E podcast. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from you today, as I certainly have. Once again, that was Johannes Mutske and Kenneth Fields sharing their advice for our Class E podcast listeners. This podcast has been brought to you through a partnership between the Furman Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Communication Studies Department at Furman University. I am your Class E podcast host, Mary Sturgill. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us.